Welcome back.
Well, who will believe it? I made it through episode 1. Oh well, on to episode 2 now. Duke 3D versus Quake. Let's go.
Is this on? Yep. Into this? Yep. Okay. Well, if you were playing games on your PC like I was back in the late 80s and early 90s,
then like me, you've probably heard of a company called Apogee, with its classic hit at the time, Commander Keen. Oh, and Duke Nukem. Well, the two respective companies went on to make 2 games we're going to look at now. But first,
let's take a look at a company that revolutionized shareware, went on to make the finest pair of FPSs you've ever seen on the Saturn.
Well, as Kid mentioned, it was the shareware idea that made them huge. At the time, swapping games in the schoolyard on 3.5-inch floppies was almost a daily activity. Companies had to take a different approach to continue to turn a profit, and eventually, after a lot of attempts of adding security codes and other ideas like that, shareware would finally take off, and Apogee grabbed the bull by both horns with hit after hit.
seeing you watching the show, we're going to assume that you probably know what shareware is. But for those that don't, we'll explain it really quickly. Games, like tapes, were getting swapped, just with cheat codes and passwords, etc. So the idea with shareware was that you only got a certain section of a game, usually the first episode, and if you liked the product you could send what they would call a donation of $20 US, so to us back then it was like 40 bucks. And they would send you a support package which usually included the full game, though some companies would just send a manual and a code that would open the game up to its full version, or a disc that replaces and adds codes to make it the full game, etc.
So Apogee made lots of games like Duke, Commander Keen, both which spawned a series, later Wolfenstein and Spear of Destiny, then Rise of the Triads, plus many more. After Wolfenstein's success, ID went on to publish their own games, but released them through GT Interactive. But I believe there was an early shareware version of Doom, I remember, that had an Apogee title, I think. So where's Apogee now? Well, they're still around, but back in 1993 when games were becoming ever more 3D, Apogee decided to branch out to different labels to suit the style of game. So in turn, 3D Realms was born to focus on 3D games. And ID? Well, who doesn't love the Doom series, the Quake series, not to mention Wolfenstein on the Xbox either. Though I must say I've played better, well, first-person shooters on the Xbox that is. But hey, that's not this show. Let's move on.
Gameplay.
These games are very difficult to compare. I mean, both of them only get better and better the more you know them, and are always fun to come back to. I mean, it doesn't even need to be said that these games were best played on PC, because I mean, it's so plainly obvious that it becomes almost painful, that at times you just want a mouse and a keyboard for ultimate control. Another reason why Duke 3D did so well on the Nintendo 64, as it offered buttons on the right as well to help with directional movement. But it's a challenge, and I don't mind that. When you get used to it, it becomes a lot easier.
Graphics maps.
The dark effect isn't so good on the Saturn graphic engine, not to mention there's quite a bit of lag when it gets busy. The system probably could have run it smoother if it was programmed perhaps a little better. But it's still very impressive that it made it to the Saturn at all. As I remember, I ran Quake on a Pentium 90 and dealt with similar issues like skipping frame rate. As for Duke 3D, well, it's not so bad. I mean, the 3D feels very different to IDs, and it might take a bit of getting used to, as you feel somewhat taller.
Sound.
I gotta give this to Duke. Even though the music from Quake is by Trent Reznor and it makes for a great soundtrack, I found the little things, like the sample of the double barrel shotty has real issues. It just seems to be set way too loud in comparison to the background. Sadly, it's all a bit of a mess in the sound department. to the point where it actually makes the game feel a little bit distorted.
Weapons!
Well, I gotta say, this is where the game gets real close. Quake has a great set of weapons, from the rocket thrower to the nail gun. Oh, by the way, can I just point out, notice there's no 9 Inch Nails logo on the nail pickups on the Saturn version? Interesting, eh? Anyway, you gotta love the creative weapons in Duke, like the Freeze Blaster and the Shrinker, all very innovative for its time.
Controls!
Duke could take a little while to figure out. It probably would help if you referred to the manual for tips on such things as flying. There seems to be a weird combo of buttons to change altitude. So it's probably not the smartest of layouts, but it works. It just doesn't seem to even come close to a PC.
So in this humble reviewer's opinion, of the best first-person shooter on the Saturn, the grand final would have to be between Doom and Duke 3D, and a few other honourable mentions, like Alien Trilogy, Exhumed, and of course Doom 2. So the winner is, well, it just goes to show, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, Doom.
Now let's see who you really are.
It was you! Yeah, and I would have got away with it too if you hadn't foiled my plan.